Okay.
Hmm? Super. Hello, everyone. Hello, also the people who will watch us later in this recording. It's super. I think it's very great to see you again and to continue thinking in a collective way about how to desindustrialize our practices. And today, during our last session, let's say we will kind of open the last question. I don't want to think in a kind of conclusion, but at least to, I don't know, how we can share how was the process of thinking and talking together about this topic. And so I will share with you a kind of short presentation, like again, 25 minutes or 20 minutes. And then the idea is to talk and to share comments about this. 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, we start this seminar to ask ourselves how we can deal with the contradiction of, in one hand, to thinking about everything somehow is wrong with the system, like something is not working because economically, sociopolitically, and so on. But in the other hand, looks like even if we have a lot of alternatives, or it's a very actually very rich about alternatives around, somehow we're still in a kind of confusion in our daily life, and because also this contradiction affect our life, also affect, of course, our practices or our artistic practices. I will always try to talk in that way because, as I say from the beginning, I assume this lecture as an artist. So that's why I also always put the problem in that frame somehow. But of course, we can go in and out all the time. So during that first meeting, we start to open this question about how to deindustrialize our practices, ourselves. And during the second meeting, we start to open this issue, but which words or concepts which we use when we're talking about that, for example. And I bring some examples about different glossaries um, from Latin America, made it by different artists and people from different disciplines, actually. So we actually talk about how we can verbalize this kind of rich, uh, I don't know, moment of knowledge and alternative from books, references, personal practices, personal beliefs, and so on. And how also how the concept or words also can just travel or traverse in different kind of disciplines. And so that's also was very, I think, nice to share with you, and also how you share with me this kind of multiple, let's say, vocabulary when we refer about our projects or um, research. And in the last meeting last week, we talked with Helen. We have a kind of conversation, and we talked somehow about, in a chaotic way, about how the industry affects everything, and also culture, with the idea of creative industry. But what is mean creative? What is how we can also kind of um how creativity also became a kind of successful way to live in our daily life, like be creative all the time. And also how the cultural industry also affect, of course, also the economy, the precarity also in art is very important issue right now. Of course, it's also about how we organize ourselves. We talk also how, at least in other fields in art, for example, in theater or cinema, the body somehow is the material. So the organization as a collective with unions is more clear in comparison with visual art, for example. It's a kind of, I don't know, it's just different. It's not good or bad. I just try to put again a kind of resume about the last conversation. And today we will talk about the industrial revolution in general, and I will share with you a kind of again about some chaotic references or points, just in order to provoke a kind of feedback. So today, as I say, we will focus why I call this seminar La Revolución Desindustrial. And so I will share with you my presentation. 1 second. Mm, screen. So, la revolución desindustrial, llamada abierta. 2025, fin de la era industriosa. This this flyer or this image referred to a kind of campaign where I invite to the people, to you, to thinking how we can imagine a life in a post-industrial way, or in a kind of way where the industry no exists anymore, or also, as Pancho say, last time I think you mentioned that how to kill the inner police, or the police who we care inside ourselves. I also thinking how to kill the industry who we kill ourselves, or how we can dismantling or shut down the industry inside ourselves, as a kind of provocation, because somehow also maybe we repeat the practices of the industrialization. And this image is based in a cover of a magazine. It's from La Revolución Surrealiste. And this magazine is part of a collective research almost 100 years ago from the Surrealist Collective. And they create a bureau of Surrealist research at the time. And the person who was the director of this bureau of Surrealist research was Antoine Artaud, the French poet. And Artaud was the editor of the edition number 3 of this magazine in 15 April 1925. And the interesting aspect of this specific magazine is he wrote and he published inside this magazine few letters. And these few letters, he writes, I don't know, letters to the Pope, letters to Dalai Lama, letters to the School of Buddha, letters to the doctors in mental hospitals, letters to the chancellors of universities, and so on. So somehow he write letters against institutions at the time. Of course, was in between wars. So also was a kind of particular moment in France and a particular moment in Europe. And but I like this idea to connect with this revolutionary moment, at least in art. Of course, avant-garde is always a strong reference, but in particular about Artaud, these letters to the chancellors of European universities makes, I don't know, a kind of also provocation, how we deal also with universities right now. And for me, it's also interesting to connect because also GCAS somehow also is a kind of proposition about to thinking about that. And this quote is from one letter. I will read right now. Sorry, my English. So maybe I will do some mistakes, but I will try. The race of prophets is extinct. Europe is becoming set in its ways, slowly embalming itself beneath the wrappings of its borders, its factories, its law courts, and its universities. The frozen mind cracks between the mineral states which close upon it. The fault lies with your moldly systems, your logic of 2 plus 2 equals 4. The fault lies with you, chancellors, caught in the net of syllogisms. You manufacture engineers, magistrates, doctors, who know nothing of the truth, mysteries of the body, or the cosmic laws of existence. False scholars, blind outside this world, philosophers who pretend to reconstruct the mind. The least act of spontaneous creation is a more complex and revealing word than any metaphysics. Antonin Artaud, Letter to the Chancellors of the European Universities. This is a small fragment in the path. I will add the link of this edition. I just find some quotes in the English version, but exists of course, the French version in extents of these different letters against institutions, but also exists the Spanish version as well. So somehow, this idea of course, this kind of reactive idea by Artaud about how to react with the reality is a constantly motivation also to thinking in a revolutionary way, at least in art, about how to act and react with this reality. And somehow I will connect with that other experience. I connect with Artaud in another way, because also I think exists a kind of period in the history where also this kind of energy was very clear, at least in art. I refer about the iconoclast period. Of course, during the history exists many moments where also for different reasons, especially from religion, they react somehow to destroy idols or figures and so on. So also somehow in this research of alternatives to how to think in this era outside the industrialization, also I like to connect with this idea of iconoclast somehow. In the image, you can see two reproductions. I find this in a museum in Zurich. It's called Riedberg Museum, and they have a huge collection about religion. And they reproduce these two images. In the left, you can see the famous scene when in Islam they expel the idols in the Kaaba. And in the right, you can see St. Nicholas destroy some idols also. And of course, they put these images there, not as a dualism, but also, of course, refer how in different kind of periods in the history, this iconoclast energy every time appear. For example, also in the Byzantine periods, it also was a kind of important issue, of course, in the Protestant reform, and also during the Spanish Empire, when also they destroy some, they make this war between Catholics and Protestant in Antwerpen, in the north of Belgium, contemporary Belgium right now. So somehow also this kind of iconoclast energy, I think, also can bring some, I don't know, some kind of options about this idea of revolution. But when I take the photo of these images, again, continue with this kind of anecdotes, you can see a kind of, I don't know if it's very clear in for you, but you can see a Buddha, a very golden Buddha in the reflection of the glass. So I don't know, it was also for me a kind of funny moment when I check my photos, like to see Buddha just sitting there in between these two very dramatic moments in these religious histories. But Buddha is just sitting there, and I don't know, in this infinite contemplative position. And somehow, when I make this presentation, I try just to follow in this very intuitive way how to make other connections about this idea of to destroy ourselves, or this, sorry, not destroy ourselves, sorry, to destroy our industry, the industry inside us, how to dismantling our inner industry. And I find another kind of proposition by Francisco Varela. Francisco Varela is a Chilean scientist. He writes about biology, but of course, he's more famous about neuroscientists as a neuroscientist, and also is a philosopher. And he also explored art in a period because Hans Ulrich Obrist and Barbara van der Linden invite him for an exhibition in Antwerp in 1999. And during this project, actually the invite was a kind of collective exhibition. It's called Laboratorium. And it is a very beautiful interview where the curator talked with Varela, Francisco Varela at the time. And Francisco Varela, he have a very important research between neuroscience and Buddhism. And actually, he really researched how the meditation can also activate some parts of the body and the brain and so on. And also, Francisco Varela is very famous against the not against robots, let's say, but for him that is no intelligence for a certain of things. So he's really focused actually in the body itself. And in this installation, he proposed to imagine the body as a laboratory. And for me, it's very interesting to think in that way, because I think also if we're thinking in a kind of disindustrial way about our connection with the reality, also this idea of to keep the energy, or to keep our inner energy, somehow the body is the most precious material, let's say, because we constantly cross with the body different experiences, let's say. Francisco Varela have a huge literature about that. I will also add in the path this document, and I will share with you a short fragment he published he made this installation, and he just projects a text on the wall, and actually the audience have to read it. So I just take a fragment from that, the last paragraph. He say, "Do it." So I will also read this fragment. Do it. Become the laboratory by standing still or sitting on the cushion provided. Proceed to do nothing. Relax your posture and attitude and observe with a light touch whatever comes into experience. That's the experiment. Note the specific manifestation of mind as if they were data. Repeat as many times as you can this gesture of full presence. of mindfulness. The laboratory is now portable and you may carry it with you wherever you go. Keep track of your findings. Um, when I research about these alternatives and how, in the end, just carry our body as a kind of the most precious thing we have, of course, when I read the text by Varela, I know the concept of mindfulness became a kind of very fashion thing also, and actually a very, I don't know, maybe I don't use well the sentence now, but also it's a very capitalistic concept because in the sense of already many companies use it. Like also I know, for example, Apple or other companies constantly talk about the importance of meditation for the workers there, or this idea of also again about to activate the creativity with that, or and so on and so on. But I think if I can say something, at least Francisco Varela was real uh, research. He really researched about that in a very serious way. So I like this idea. At least he explored art, and he tried to also share this in that field, which is also a very interesting way to connect science and art, but in another way. And in the next image, I will I want to invite you to do a kind of exercise. It's a it's a bit performative. Um, it's also a kind of we will activate a piece by Francisco Varela also, and I will read a short text. And the idea is when you hear my voice, um, I hope you can also follow or do it. But of course, it's a optional thing. So this is the text. This text is by Amy Cohen and Francisco Varela, and also they make this, let's say, text also for a exhibition and a project who is called Do It. So I will read also this text. So maybe you can also follow in your home. Do it. Ask yourself a question. Any question. In 4 words or less, but no more. Breathe in. Breathe out. 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 Go back to your question or turn the page. Thank you. So as you see, today was more a kind of, I really tried to play with different images and references, really, because as I say, I really don't have a answer about this issue, but the plan is really to share with you during this seminar how to really find alternatives. I think at least Francisco Varela proposed something. I think the idea to just connect with the body, I think it's a very, very directly and clear alternative. But maybe exists another ones. So I don't know. Would be nice to hear you if you have comments or any thoughts or any references in this last session, last meeting. We have 30 minutes for talking.
Does anybody have any thoughts they want to share? I found that very relaxing, that poem. It made me think about well, two things. First of all, this idea of, you know, we're conversing about these topics, but we don't know. We don't come with any answers, any sort of foredrawn conclusions. And that, as you say, you point out that even something that could have this emancipatory potential, like reconnecting with yourself in a kind of stillness or whatever, has been corporatized in mindfulness. And it's interesting, it almost is like anything can be, you know, capitalized upon if it has with it a certain logic, which is as a solution to some problem. But rather, maybe we're not going out looking for, well, we're maybe opening ourselves to solutions, but we're not going with any kind of full drawn conclusions about what those solutions are. It made me think also about comedy as something that these little things that sometimes happen that erupt in the world that like go against the logic of essentialism, of setting up you know, the experience of being human as innately problematic ideologically outside of, you know, material problems that we need to fix with things that we do collaboratively, and setting up solutions that we then pay for. And yes, humor is something that has been really kind of like banned or corporatized. There's been this sort of invasion of humor, or maybe taking away from humor what is really explosive of ideology within it. I was just watching, we just did a podcast the other week about this movie Hell or High Water, which came out in 2016, and it's about a couple of brothers who are put in a very precarious economic situation, and they end up going against the law to make money back, to buy a house back from a bank that's going to cost their family a lot of money. And it's a very very explicitly Marxist film, but it doesn't draw any conclusions. It's not patronizing, it's not judgmental or anything like that. But one something in it that really struck me was the use of humor. And there are these two policemen in the film that follow these two brothers. And one is this older white man that's about to be retired, and the other one is this half Mexican, half Native American guy. And the relationship between them is they use it's very fraternal, but they use this very, very rude humor, like very, what we might think now is, if you just read it on paper, is offensive, right? But the way that it works is it's saying that I know that this essentialism doesn't apply to you, and that's why it's funny. So instead of it just being like all men are this, or all Mexican people are this, you say that statement to this person with the implicit knowledge where you're basically saying, but you aren't this essentialism, and we love each other. And there is something about these things, like, you know, so these, I guess, in terms of these moments of like reflection, which could be taken to this sort of like capitalist logic, or these statements, these essentialist statements that people use as a joke, that could be taken in their essentialism as offensive, or could lead us, you know, that everything's always operating on more than one level. So potentially in like everything we do, there is some potentiality outside of this sort of like pre-convinced market logic. But I don't know how we orientate ourselves towards that, and maybe we just know it when we see it. I don't know.
I wonder if it's like something to do with just taking ourselves too seriously.
Yeah.
And like, you know, Eduardo, when you misspoke and said we have to kill ourselves, there was something quite funny. I mean, it was really funny, but maybe something quite poignant in the idea, because I've thought this many times, that the main obstacle is I just have to get over myself in many different ways, and then, you know, then I would be somehow released from certain kind of I don't know, more punishing pressures that I put on myself. But I think it's connected to that industrialized self, the kind of the I don't know, the self-made person, that all of that kind of high amount of pressure, I think, yeah, is connected to the industrial self.
Yeah, that's very true. I was also thinking about how this applies to the Marx, you know, the passage in the introduction to the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, where he's basically like showing how an ideal, like an idealist position affects a materialist position. So, you know, there's this sort of thing of like, well, there's no point in even thinking about it. It's all materiality. Like, there's nothing we can do. It's just the material conditions. But at a certain point, we have to not accept the material conditions, or those materials have to be changed by a change in philosophy or a change in spirit or something. And in that passage, he talks about how we, you know, use ideology to cover over the chains with fake flowers, and we have to take away that ideology, see the chains, and pick the living flower. But I always think about things like, in terms of what people are willing to take, or obviously we need to survive materially, but how we, as you're sort of pointing out, Devinda, things like taking yourself too seriously, or like going for more than you need, and how you accept these things, and instead of doing anything about your material conditions, which are shit, if you not like, as in collectively right now we can see the situation is shit, but instead of actually confronting them, you'd think that by now we'd all be like, this is so obvious. And I think, you know, psychoanalysis as well, it's not like unearthing, the process isn't to unearth some deep truth, but to help you confront a truth that's already really obvious, that's already there on the surface. But the thing that distracts us from being able to see that truth is something to do with the way we are kind of like spiritually or otherwise, you know, engaged in the world, because humans aren't just material beings. You know, we have mind, and we have thought, and we have the unconscious and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think things like, so yeah, taking yourself too seriously, like how we as humans are so willing to sacrifice so much for something that might strengthen our sense of self in the world, or that we might think that other people want us to achieve, or will make us look better in the eyes of other people.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah, as both of you say, I mean, the capacity of humor, of course, in the end is a constantly, I don't know, alternative as well to and deal with ourselves, but also deal with this kind of constantly contradiction around. And you're right, because I don't know, it's so much. It's like, even I follow many videos in YouTube, or constantly also Instagram show me when I follow, I don't know, specific collectives who talk about also the idea of course, the industry, when we consume some certain food, or certain, I don't know, clothes, and something, I don't know, or we travel, I don't know, it's a kind of very, very kind of, I know it's very, very huge, but yeah, in the end, to also react with this kind of absurdity, of course, is always there, because I don't know, also to the lack of tools, or to react about that, or to create something. That's why I think, at least in art, somehow, I don't know, of course, because maybe we sublimate the thing, or I don't know, but at least we can bring the conditions to thinking about in a collective way, because also art itself is rich in terms of already in a kind of emotions and expressions, and of course can at least make a non-illustrative way, or didactical way, also can be chaotic. That's why I talk about Artaud, even if sometimes he's also have this picture of a very serious, of course, Frenchman and so on, because of course he suffered a lot, but also this kind of punk, I don't know, reaction also, like I want to save this, I want to just create this kind of absurd bureau of surrealist research, but I will make this magazine in order to share with you. So in the end, this idea of socialize at least this thought and continue publish or continue make books or poems about that, I think is the most, I don't know, in the end, impressive thing in the end. Like also the capacity to continue create something in order to show this, I don't know if called mirrors, but at least, I don't know, reflections sometimes like just appear like that. So
I'm going to, okay, trying to make a counterpoint in terms of how showing it maybe in the art world or the art system, it also could be really in the opposite direction of destroying the industrialized aspect of ourselves, thinking in particular in the body, because I think it's really interesting that you bring the body today. In personal terms, for me, the body is everything. Like you experience the world through the body. Your world is your body and is connected with culture, with everything. And I'm thinking, for example, in the context of things, and for example, how what Artaud did in his time, thinking, for example, in this radio theater about the death of God, I can't remember the exact, no, the trial of God. It's completely different to think in Artaud reading that in that period, in a radio station, in that particular moment, of doing the same today. And also how the body has been capitalized by the art system in a lot of ways. And I think the most obvious example is, for example, Marina Abramovic with the performance and how he managed to present this huge performance, I don't know, at MoMA with people making a huge line waiting hours just to be in front of her. Like, that's, I don't know if it's stupid or it's an extremely clever way of making the body and the experience of the body a product inside this system. So I'm thinking in the possibilities of body, but also in the experience that you don't show. For example, I don't know, the perversions that one can have and happen in closed doors, in a different dynamic that doesn't need to be capitalized, but just demand an experience in the body. And I think that has more power eventually to overthrow this productiveness that we have in our mind in terms of artistic practices in relation with the system to produce and show, produce and show. So what happened in the intimate aspect of people when they can experiment with the body without necessity of showing that experimentation. Maybe they can share different things after, but the process that you don't see, I think it's much more interesting and appears the body like a potentiality, like not the object, but the experience. And I think that's also could be interesting to think about how kill the authority or the industrial production in ourselves. Maybe, I don't know. Perversity.
I just would like to add some, first of all, thank you for the talk. It's very interesting. And I just would like to add some reference regarding what is Francisco has said, and also Helen. On the first place, I was remembering the book Staying with Trouble by Donna Haraway. Maybe you are familiar with that book. And it's very interesting the way in which she proposes the responsibility, even if we are going to live just 10 more years, but we need to live those years with responsibility. And maybe the sense of responsibility in art could be related with stop producing. And I think that is a very interesting choice right now to walk away from the market, but maybe to walk away from this kind of fetish approach to the body, as Francisco has exposed, because I think that right now with the digital media, this has changed a lot. For example, in the case of Marina Abramovic, is quite interesting because she's now working on the digitization of her own body. So when she will be dead, we will be able to enjoy her performances in absentia, because she's create this digital virtual reality to enjoy performances after death. And this is, I think, the climax of this approach to the a fetish approach to the body. And I think in performance art in particular, and in many other arts, that is a trend, a very dangerous trend, because we need to cross the last frontier in the sense that how else we can become a product. The body seems to be the last frontier in this case, because if we are going to think about the artist after his death, how to capitalize the artist after his death, that is very compelling, I think. But I think that the radical approach to stop producing could be something very interesting, because right now we are so obsessed with not just the art market, but also this kind of need for recognition. Artists are, since the very inception of the institution of art education, we are so obsessed with this kind of recognition. And I think that this need of recognition is very, very related to our context in this kind of new, I don't know if it's an industrialized era or a neoliberalist era or post-capitalistic era. I don't know how to talk about it, but I think that it's very important to put this on the table. We need to stop producing just in mass, because right now we need more strategies to think, to change our actual reality, rather than just producing more objects or experiences that are not contributing to anything critical. I think so.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think that there is this issue of recognition within the arts in particular. And I think there's multiple reasons. I mean, a part of the ideology of the artist as individual genius, and this is really part of capitalist logic, like what role the artist plays in terms of capitalist ideology. You know, this idea of not all these artists that are producing work, you know, in all kinds, but the sort of the individual chosen artist who is responsible for their own destiny as this, you know, individual, like, you know, sort of like a Bill Gates figure or a Mark Zuckerberg figure, that they, you know, the artist as well is the same, this sort of individual genius. My sister works in the fashion industry, and I see this as sort of the director, instead of, you know, this being the work of, you know, thousands of people. And not only that, influenced by wider social forces, and often what we create is not really from our own, you know, mind per se, but as a result of the world and milieu that we come from. And so, yeah, seeing, you know, I always think about the idea of a gold medal in the Olympics, and the way that sort of the Nike ad would have it is that the person who wins the gold medal has won it because they're getting up at dawn every week, and they've been training since they were 2 years old, and they put in all the hard work, and they're out running when it's raining, and that's why they won the gold medal. And so, the value of the gold medal is that there were all these other people trying to compete and they failed, and it's the sacrifice of everybody that makes the value. So, you know, that genius logic, I think, is really toxic, and then that obviously leads everybody else to feel inadequate, even though this is a result of wider social forces and is completely out of our hands, and then leads us to perpetually seek recognition. But I also think that social media as a replacement for interpersonal dialogue is really affecting everybody in terms of the need for recognition, because recognition, we only are recognized by minds of others who are also speaking subjects. Therefore, they are divided, lacking subjects. And people that we see on screen, you know, cast as sort of celebrity figures, as we all are on Instagram, to each other. Everybody appears whole and complete to us. And we cannot imagine ourselves being in the eyes of the other if the other is a whole and complete being. Like the other, the way that psychoanalysis works, obviously, is that you have this dialogue with somebody. You might go and transferentially project at the beginning that your psychoanalyst knows everything, but you're gradually let down, and you're able to see yourself in the eyes of another person, and then you see yourself as you are, and you have this sense of self. So recognition is, you know, there is a lack of good recognition, and you know, this sort of toxic onlineness and seeing what everyone else is producing and feeling inadequate is really not good in terms of this idea of recognition.
David, do you want to say something?
Oh, I did actually. That's so interesting. You can see it on my face. Yeah, I was thinking that I don't quite know what's meant by not producing in a kind of a greater sense than just literally not doing something. Because if it's a kind of like a strike, that's one way of putting it, but that's not what was said. So I'm not sure. Maybe if Ursula or I think Vanessa also mentioned not producing. If you could clarify, yeah, what you mean or why.
If I can answer, I just think that we need to stop and think before producing just like a mass production. For example, I work in a college of modern music, which seems very cool at the beginning, but the industrialization, this is a kind of obsession, because the students are obsessed with producing records and giving concerts and concerts, but creatively, most of the time, they are not exploring nothing new, because they have this need just to produce, to be seen, to have a lot of exposure. So they have no other possibilities to rethink about her artistic activity, about how, in which way I'm able to do any contribution to the actual situation of the country or the climate change or whatever is socially important right now. And in this sense, I think that we need to stop producing if we have nothing significant or nothing that is the product of a huge reflection, a deep reflection on the issues of our contemporary troubles. I think we really need to rethink about why we are just producing and producing, because most of the time it's just for an external condition, that this kind of mentality of social media, that you need to be an entrepreneur, you need to be the best, and all this is just providing a kind of context for peer competition, in which we are just hating each other because we wanted to be the first, but we are not thinking in one moment about what my artistic practice is contributing. I think that this is the point. It's not just I'm going to do a strike, I'm going to do nothing. It's why I am producing. What is the scope behind this?
That makes sense.
Can I comment on that too?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Oh, I was sorry, I was speaking. Sorry, someone else was speaking in my background too. But yeah, I want to explore that, because it makes me think a lot of not producing in terms of whatever you continue your creative practice, but I think it's more about, like, I'm thinking of the publishing industry as a writer, because it's all about this instant gratification, right? And we bought into this idea of like relevancy, and if you're not constantly producing, then you're no longer relevant, and I have to stay in front and in mind of everybody, right? So it's like this capitalistic idea of growth, right? Like, if you're not constantly growing and extracting, then you're not going to win or whatever, right? So I think a lot of during pandemic lockdown, this whole like, it's okay to take a break, you don't have to write the next great novel, like do nothing, it's okay, you know what I mean? Like that whole conversation saying like, don't beat yourself up, you don't have to write the great novel or whatever, it's like, it's to me, it's more about like produce on your own time, but you don't have to share or publish absolutely everything, right? And it's like, again, in the writing world, there's this concept of the shitty first draft. Well, now social media shares everyone's shitty first draft and shitty first thought and shitty first go round of everything, right? Like, and you said, what is the creative practice? Like, you don't know why you're even doing it. It's very earnest. Young musicians record their first song, record their first album, and then they have the ability to put it out immediately, right? And then, oh, where are my accolades? Where's the record contract? Where's my suitcase of money, right? Like this. And going back to also thinking with this entrepreneurship and the gig economy, you don't need the boss anymore, because we have become our own boss, right? Like we are we're micromanaging ourselves and we're exploiting ourselves, and then you no longer even need a boss to do that or a company to do that, because we have internalized all of those same mechanisms, and we think, oh, but I'm doing it for myself, which in reality, like, you're not. It's all the same thing. So to me, it's less, I love the concept of not producing, but to me, it's like, okay, what's the most responsible thing for me to do is to not publish. There's so much being published right now. Like, is my responsibility to not then publish? So like, yeah, create. We're all going to create no matter what. We're all going to continue to write and make our artwork. But yeah, that constant publishing, that constant posting, that constant sharing, really without thinking behind it.
Something I've really found in my industry, which has just become just this, like, when you look back at different periods of time where truly interesting films were being made and were able to be made, we've sort of shut down this mechanism that you're describing, guys, of like, think, like, what am I actually saying? Is this anything new? Is this contributing in any way? And this specifically is worse in certain situations where we have like state-controlled trickle-down economics, where we rely on grants and stuff that are tied to corporate capitalism in a more mystified way. And there is this real certainty without reflecting about the right way to do things and saying something. So we have this very determined, absolutist ideological work that gets made and made and made and made, the same thing over and over again, saying the same thing about identity politics over and over and over and over and over again, as the sort of self-congratulatory. We know that this is the right, but it's all done with this. So one of the governing bodies in the industry I work in, one of the criteria, I mean, the wording has slightly changed now, but was that a film must express progressive ideals. But it's like, well, what does that even mean? And there's no, if somebody is doing something, because this is something that is very, very tied to corporate capitalism, all these criteria are very, very safe and risk averse and tied to an ideology that already is very much in operation in contemporary capitalism. But it has this sort of patter of like, oh, it's liberatory in some way, or it's, it's philosophical in some way. But if you actually truly do something, maybe things like experimental film let you, and this is why, art is so important, because you can sort of push the boundaries, but it's amazing how in certain fields, this has been really restricted. And so, it costs money to make films, although there are ways of doing it in different ways, but we all need to eat food and everything like that. So we need, to have some money to produce things. But it can also be really anxiety producing and really like feel like you're like crazy making, that you're like, well, no, this is actually what a thoughtful film might do. And it's almost like the language, the collective language in these sort of, I always think about the way that Hegel describes each time in history, and that like in the phenomenology of spirit, and like the master slave dialectic, and how basically if you have a system that casts out an alternate voice, i.e. a place for thought or a place for consideration that's outside the system will crumble, because it doesn't have a vision from a dialectical other seeing it so it can recognize itself and the way it's actually functioning. And this sort of way that the thought-provoking, political, reflective, liberal, quote unquote, space is being corporatized. It's like there's no space. And if you are doing something generally thoughtful, it's almost like, what is this? Oh my God, because the space has been so sliced back and back and back and back and back. And this is why it's so important to think, because it's precisely in not thinking that we've gone to this stage where everything is absorbed by this ideology, and where, for instance, mindfulness gets taken on by Google to make more productive workers. And it's like, how do we continue to do this when there's so much pressure financially and ideologically, and like when you're sort of like, well, it's not recognized as the thing it is, without going mad. I don't know.
Thank you so much. I think it's a very, very intense, of course, feedback. That's why I shared with you minutes ago about this idea of "Do It" by Varela. Like, it's also a very humoristic way, no? He just says "do it," but then he just say just breathe in, breathe out. Yeah, just breathe. It's the only thing we have right now. So say this idea about to stop to produce. Also, it's this idea to live the present. Maybe when Varela, that's like how also I understand, like the idea to really connect with the present, like what is right now here with you in this moment in this room right now, and they really thinking how rich is just this moment of life. Let's say it's a very kind of, it's very essential in the end, but I think to constantly also thinking about, or at least to stop to thinking about, just to live that and breathe in and breathe out, at least can be this kind of connection again with the present, with this specific moment. And I try at least to do this during the seminars. It was a very, very nice, intense 4 meetings. Probably the path, which we have all these links and references is still there. Actually, I will just share quickly. So the path is desindustrial, actually, and here you can find different links from online material from the 4 sessions. It's not everything, of course, but also you can, of course, watch the videos, and then you can again, I don't know, watch all these kind of references in during the seminar. So thank you so much. I don't know if someone else have final comments.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. It's been really, really interesting and really great to share ideas and to think in ways. Really great.
I just want to say, of course, my email is there. If everyone also wants to continue exchange, we can continue also via email. And thanks to the art department, I am already curious about the next activities. So,
Pancho, do you want to talk briefly about what we've got next? Because I know Ursula's going to give a talk.
Yeah, there is one seminar that I'm copying the link here, and I'm just with all these links. And a talk that Ursula is going to give about erotism. I'm gonna copy the link too. Okay. And you are all more than welcome to join the 2 activities. And thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you so much.
thank
Yeah.
you.
So it's been a nice Sunday activity.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Hating
thanks.
the world.
Thanks, much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to stop the recording.